Hello, everyone. As you know, this is Craig Gray. You're on the PeaceWalker podcast, and we are on episode, what the heck, 249. So today I wanted to welcome a guest and a friend of mine, colleague, Kate Chase-Ophoff. Ophoff?
Um, yeah, you got
I'll,
it.
I'll let you work that out. But she recently got married and has a little one daughter, correct?
Oh,
Yeah,
hmm
little daughter, and she's driving herself crazy. And I'm going to let her kind of introduce herself. But before we do that, at the beginning of all my shows, I like to invite everyone to come and join us in our private community. So if you go to peacewalker.mn.co, you can get access to our free private network. It's off from Facebook and the all the big tech and all that. It's just a small group of us who have this idea of, well, what is it like to live a more powerful life, learn how to protect yourself more effectively, learn how to be a good leader and good communicator and have some people who have your back. And if that is of interest to you out there, get on peacewalker.mn.co and you can set up your profile. Once you're in the community, you are going to have access to several free resources, such as we got a conflict communications mini course, we have a mini self-defense course on there. We've got other coaching and community resources for you. And obviously, you can also go premium if you want to level it up and get all of our real goodies. But a good first step is just getting into that free private community, and you can start exploring that and getting more connected with the community and the resources of being a peace walker. Once again, that is peacewalker.mn.co. And you're also going to get access to my almost daily emails where almost every day I'm going to email you a story, a tip, trick, and a tactic about this lifestyle and all the crazy people that are in it and what we're up to and how we're making our lives better. So get on it, peacewalker.mn.co. Without further ado, back to Kate Chase. So, Kate, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and then we
Yeah.
can we can get to it.
So, Kate Chase-Ophoff. I know it's a tongue twister. I have been within the self-defense teaching and coaching community since roughly 2010. Um, Craig, I think we must have met around that same time frame.
Sounds
I
about
have
right.
been um, I have been learning martial arts, various different disciplines. When I look back on that experience, I sort of compare it to like dating in a way. Um, Kickboxing has
Bad
been,
marriage.
yeah, yeah. Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, the bad marriage. Um, we're,
We'll
yeah.
talk about that.
Um, I've been in like the most monogamous relationship, if you will, with kickboxing, mostly Muay Thai, some
Yeah.
hybrid system kickboxing. Um, I have been in and out of Krav over the years, trying to get my husband back into that with me. I think it's important when you are in a relationship and you're growing and improving together. Like, I think it's a fun opportunity to suck at something together. So that's always the goal.
That is a great, you could write a book on that.
Yeah.
How to get connected and stay connected,
hmm
suck together.
Yep. Um, I recently opened my own self-defense business, so learning as I go as a small business owner and growing and scaling, growing as an individual in that regard, because my background is in law enforcement and corporate security. So um, that's been a really exciting aspect of my life as of recent, and just reaching out into West Michigan and sharing my knowledge and hopefully helping improve the confidence and overall safety of women in
Nice.
the area.
Yeah, you have a lot to bring to the table on there too. It's also funny. There's so many rabbit holes that we can go down. It's cool and scary at the same time. But I was telling my significant other, Jen, has got four
Yeah.
girls, and the second youngest, Ella, who you terrify her.
I do?
Yes. Well, yeah, 'cause you traumatized her in her boot camp, her police boot camp thing in the summer. So she's
Oh.
17 years old. She's in the law enforcement, I don't know what they call it, law enforcement program at KCTC, which is like a Kent Skills Center kind of a thing.
Hmm.
And I'm kind of explaining to our listeners out there. And so this past summer, she went to this like couple-week boot camp that all the local municipalities kind of bring out their community officers and trainers, and they train these kids who are potentially, considering a career in law enforcement. And Kate, our lovely Kate, is like brutalizing these poor kids, yelling at them and making them do burpees and all this stuff.
Yep.
And Ella, it was so funny because Ella comes home and she's complaining about it, and she mentions your name, and I'm like, oh, I know Kate. Let me text her right now and make sure you're doing an adequate amount of burpees. She's like, you do
Oh,
not know her. I'm like, the hell I do. I certainly do know her.
yeah,
So
that is
she was
too funny.
mortified. Like, so well, you better not be back talking to your mom because I'm gonna give Kate a call and she's gonna put the wherewithal on you. But I was talking to her and about, oh yeah, I'm doing an interview with Kate. She's like, Kate Chase? Like, yeah. Want me to put in a good word for you? Maybe she'll come out and help you train.
Oh yeah. I That is something that I've considered. So I spent the last, well, since COVID, I had to shift. So taught self-defense in the like collegiate environment.
Right.
I think that during COVID, you and I have maybe had a conversation regarding like where do I go from here, because
Yeah.
I wasn't real comfortable in the online training space. I just didn't feel like I could convey appropriately like how to do the techniques. You know, there's a missing component to like actually experiencing it firsthand and
Right.
having that one time with an instructor. So I wasn't real comfortable doing that, and the natural move was shifting into defensive tactics. And I never really intended on fulfilling the like boot camp instructor role. It just so happened that my defensive tactics students complained so much about my warm ups that the then director of the academy thought she's the perfect person.
Right.
Um,
That's hilarious.
yeah, and you know, I think what's important for those kids to realize, especially my first year teaching, I was pregnant. So I'm trying to maintain this air of hard nosed authority when I'm late in my pregnancy and waddling to class.
Right.
And um, so that was an interesting journey.
Well, let's
But
back up too, because we didn't really say because you're a police officer.
I actually just left law enforcement.
What?
I picked up a role in corporate security.
Oh no way. You okay? So you were a law. I see. This is new news to me. So that's
Yeah.
so you
Well,
were a law enforcement officer for Kent County Sheriff's Department, right?
yep, correct. I opened my business this past year, and the amount of interest I had, I mean, I'm so grateful. It was like a tremendous, I don't want to say surprise, but I really went all in with marketing and social media and reached out to the network I had already established, saying, you know, I'm opening this business. I would like to offer these trainings. So it became very apparent that I would not be able to grow and scale my business while maintaining a traditional law enforcement schedule.
Sure.
Another layer to that being like my husband's also in law enforcement.
Yeah.
I know you worked in corporate security as well, so
Yeah.
that there's always that uh, that allure of the business because there's a lot more financial security. For me,
You think
work
so?
life, yeah, yeah. Um, Work life balance was a struggle. That was kind of a running theme between my husband and I.
Yeah,
Dual law enforcement, heavily involved in various training aspects. He's in the military. I kickbox. It's like we don't have 48 hours in a day.
that's it
Um,
too. They're very, yeah, it's a lifestyle, that's for sure.
it's a lifestyle. And I have always been someone that, there's things that define who I am as a person. And for many years, I didn't expect motherhood or parenthood to be one of those things. And people tell you it changes your life. It will change your priorities. It will change your outlook on your career, really every life arena. And it truly did.
Well, you got a human
Um,
being now. You birthed and now are raising, and it's a life-changing. So even from my standpoint of, I've never had biological kids myself, and I wasn't really, I hadn't really planned on it.
mhm,
But when Jen and I met, she and I have been together for what, 11 years, and
yeah,
so she has four girls, so essentially they're my four girls, and
right.
even to a lesser degree, much lesser degree than having your child, but still, it was still a life and game changer in many many aspects.
Absolutely. So, well, similarly, my husband has two older daughters who are
Oh, that's right.
teenagers.
Yeah.
So 3 years old, 15, and soon to be 19. The whole spectrum of female emotion in our household.
Yeah, are
um,
they 25, 22, 17, 15?
yeah, you get it.
There's two of them out of the house and two of them in.
Uh, but in that step parenting role, you become a parent yourself, and you take a look at like how you think you are sort of parenting those kids. And
Yep.
there was a shift for me, certainly. Like I feel a lot more obligated and more protective over all of my girls now,
Sure.
becoming a mother.
You've grown
So
into that role, and now you're a biological mother yourself, so that
yep.
changes the game too. So, and I'm sure you are a phenomenal mother, and you're growing, all the time, and just like, with what you have to offer, like in women's self-defense and whatnot. I mean, you got a lot to offer that, but it changes the game, and well, maybe we can get into, what brought you into like this protector path.
So looking back into childhood, both of my parents were athletes, and there was not pressure, but they encouraged me to explore both avenues when it came to their sports that they were super passionate about. So my dad played hockey, went on to coach, and my mom was a competitive swimmer. Um, so when I think of like my first experiences playing sports, my dad was like, all or nothing, this kid's going to play hockey. Um, and there was so few girls throughout my experience playing hockey. And, it went from floor hockey to street hockey. Um, it was mostly street hockey that was very popular when I was a youngster for some reason. So, um, and I saw myself excelling in this sport where it's only me. I have no comparison for like fellow females in the sport.
Right.
And I think a little bit of that, like looking back, was a little ego driven, right? Like I
Sure.
can do this better than the boys. Um, and that's kind of how I went on to look at my career path, quite honestly.
Well, law enforcement
Um,
is still predominantly male. I mean, it's a lot more
yep.
open nowadays for female, but
Hmm.
still a lot more oriented towards the men.
Yep. I mean, security is the same way. It's
Yeah.
exciting to be a female, like breaking into that industry as a female. Um, but so long story short, regarding like my fundamental experience, like the foundation of my athleticism and sport experience. You get up into middle school and there's no women's hockey teams. So what comes next? My mom was a swimmer, as I mentioned. The marriage of those two sports was water polo. So my parents were like, "We have the perfect sport for you."
It's
Uh,
wonderful.
yeah, and it truly was. I looked back at my high school experience, and it was not like the academics or
Right.
even like the social experiences, going to dances, parties, even like my core memories were playing water polo.
And
Uh,
that's a relatively tough sport too. I mean, that's you got to be really in condition to do water polo
yeah, so you are basically treading water for
all the
upwards of
time.
45 minutes. Yep. All upper body strength. That laid the groundwork for me to be very successful with kickboxing. Um, so that was really what started it for me. I had a shoulder injury in college that kind of sidelined me for a bit.
Did you have
Had
a scholarship
I
or
didn't know.
you
I
didn't?
went to Grand Valley and would have picked up on the club team.
Ah,
Yep.
okay, sure.
Parents wanted me to explore schools out of state. I'm an only child. That was, kind of a dream my parents had, but realistically, they would have been heartbroken had
Oh
I
yeah, they
left
don't
the
want you.
state.
They want their little daughter too far out.
Right. Yeah. Um, so took, I think, a year or so off from sports in general and was completely and utterly lost. Had like a young life crisis, if you will, um, because my purpose, right, my driver, what gets me out of bed in the morning is the sport. It's improving and doing the conditioning and the routine of things. So um, I bounced majors because of that. I landed in criminal justice, kind of not knowing where I would end up in that field. I knew I had this like tremendous athleticism. I knew that I could outperform men in some degree. So like I would pick up bouncing gigs
Yeah.
and just kill it. Like no one wanted to mess with me, and you kind of build this. I don't want to say it's like a facade. That's not it, but it's almost like
Well, it's a
a
persona.
role yeah, a
Yeah.
role you play.
Yeah.
Um, and after I had rehabbed and kind of gotten over the shock of being out of the sports world, um, I just randomly visited a boxing gym, and it was off division and super grimy.
Did
You
you go to
know,
Pride?
what's that?
Did you go to Pride?
I don't remember the name of it. It changed names. It was not very well ran. Uh Chris Cohey was there for a time.
Blues Gym.
That may have been it.
I bet it was
Yep.
Blues. Yeah. Because Pride, like all this Pride hasn't been around for a long time in Grand Rapids, but you know, all the professional boxers that were here, which Buster Mathis Jr. and Senior came
Yeah,
to
right.
Pride and all that. When I was like 18, I went down to Pride and I trained there for maybe 6 months. And
Okay.
right before Buster went pro, I was one of the meat puppets in the ring. Oh my, oh, it was ridiculous.
Meat puppets.
It was, oh yeah, he was not pretty. Let's put it that way. It's matter of fact,
Oh,
a few years ago he had called me and because he was wanted to do something collaborative with like Ronin, martial arts, and
whoa.
he had a new gym coming up, and so he went down to a coffee shop him and his manager and I'm like, Buster, I don't know if you remember me. But we sparred like when because he's my age, he's a little older. I think he's maybe 57, something like that.
Okay.
I'm 54. I'll be 55 in a few months, but I'm like, I don't think you remember me. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't. I said, well, it's all right.
That's
But
funny.
good guy. Anyways, I don't mean to hijack the conversation. So you were going to a boxing gym.
Tried that. I think I switched over to Krav, but somewhere in there, my girlfriends, knowing that I've had this kickboxing experience and I'm really enjoying it, my girlfriends at college convinced me to take a self-defense class.
Yeah.
And I mean, it took probably 6 months of convincing. I had it on my schedule, and every day it comes up. I'm like, I don't need this. This is a waste of my time. I already know these things. I'm too good for this. Basically that was my attitude.
Right.
And my girlfriends are like, "Well, can't you just take it with us? It'll be fun." And I am just running my mouth about why I don't need it and that would never happen to me. But I give in. So we take this class together, the three of us,
That wasn't
and
my class, right? You're talking rad
no, this
or
was,
something.
yeah, this was a rad class. Yep,
Yeah.
at Grand Valley. That
Yeah.
would have been, oh my gosh. Had I brought them to one of your classes, that would have just been a total shock. Um, so very, very basic. There's at the end of the class, the instructor suits up in a red man suit, and
Yeah.
it's perfect because it's at the end of all classes, so you're stressed from finals and you get to beat the daylights out of your instructor. So that was my key takeaway. I'm loving that I'm getting this opportunity to just wail on someone with all these pads, and there's no recourse for it, and they're not hitting me back either, which is
Right. That's even
phenomenal.
better. Just a walking
Yeah,
punching bag.
right. But I started to notice week to week as we would go to class together, there was a shift between my two friends, and their confidence drastically improved. And I was always like the shepherd, right? We're
Yeah.
in our young 20s, so we're going out to the bars, and I'm constantly like wrangling them. There's always this like instinct to protect that. Don't talk to this person. Don't walk by this alley. You have to do all these things, and they're already getting that coaching. So it's obviously has greater impact coming from an instructor versus me just badgering them
Oh, but
about
you
it.
but you already laid the foundation. They're like, oh, that's what Kate says all the time. And you're like,
I
see, I
don't know.
told you, look.
Yeah, I hope that that's how they thought, but I'm not 100% on that. Um, so really seeing the change in their overall demeanor and their confidence, I started to realize like this, there's something to this.
Right.
Um, so I beat the daylights out of the instructor. He took his helmet off. He was looking at me, and it was like, I've never been hit that hard. So whatever you're doing, like keep doing it. Um, and then immediately we have a conversation about like, I want to become an instructor. What's it going to take? Um, I think at that point I was the youngest to be certified in RAD.
Okay.
Um, and then my career teaching took off from there. That following semester, I think I was teaching while I was still enrolled, um, and 5 classes a week, back and forth from Grand Valley. So my target audience then, and my ideal audience really even now, is college age women, particularly that like 18, 19
Yeah.
age group
Well, that's
where they're
kind of the
going off.
sweet spot, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, where they're going off to college, they're finding that newfound independence.
Yeah.
Um, and I
Well,
think in total,
statistically, that's their most vulnerable too, is that first semester of the first year of college, especially
yeah,
if they're dorming, if they're away from home, that's the largest potentiality for sexual assault.
exactly. Yeah. So I taught for, gosh, 12, 13 years.
Yeah.
Was a couple of years in and picked up state director of the RAD program, which was amazing, getting to oversee all of the programs statewide. Um, Again, COVID hit, so I don't have the experience or I don't have the ability to continue coaching, at least at GVSU. It's tough to put on, community uh, seminars. Really, no one is, as far as self-defense is concerned, and maybe you guys continued, right? You did the social distancing. I remember
We
I
kept
jumped back.
training. I mean, we bounced
Yep.
back and forth between online
Hmm.
in the park, in the Richmond
I
Park.
remember the park.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then at the academy, and we would keep shifting. We never shut down. And probably because of our, my premium membership that started in
Hmm.
2017, where I was already producing videos and used to Zoom and all that. It was seamless. I knew it's like, oh, Whitmer's going to shut us down. And sure
Yeah.
enough, a couple days later, bam, but we had already transitioned. I'm like, here goes. We were ready and we just rocked it. So,
Yep.
and then, yeah, so we never shut down. And it was interesting too, in that time period. I mean, people were freaked out. So
Yeah.
our attendance never went down in that. Matter of fact, our attendance now is worse than it was then. I think
Really? That's
yeah, I think the post-COVID people are way less committal.
yeah.
They're always been last minute. Now they're really last minute. They'll flake out even more frequently than they used to. So yeah, so attendance now is worse than it was during COVID. And again, I
Hmm.
think I think people really wanted during COVID. I think people really wanted the camaraderie.
Sure.
Nobody.
Yeah. The
And
sense of
the interesting
yeah.
part is too is I say because we recorded all those and I saved them and we did our at the end of the class we would do our campfire talk, our fireside chat.
Yeah.
And I recently reviewed some of those and I'm like, holy cow, those I think a lot of people have selectively omitted a lot of the trauma that they experienced during COVID. I have a recording of the day before or the afternoon of the riots downtown
Oh.
in Grand Rapids. And I told people, I said, well, there's going to be a demonstration. I said, if you're going to go, just keep your eyes out and get ready to bug out if you need to, because it could get hot. And we went on
Hmm.
and on and on about all this stuff, right? And and then I have another fireside chat recording of us doing a debrief after the riots. And I have a fireside chat of when COVID first hit and nobody knew what was going on. I mean, it was really kind of strange. Why they're almost hard to watch. It's
Yeah. I bet.
interesting because you forget about a lot of that. When your phone went off and if they're quarantining everybody or like after the riots is the first time that I saw in Grand Rapids here with National Guard coming down. Right, so the
Yep.
big long line of the National Guard trucks and soldiers coming down to put curfews in the city and whatnot, and
Man.
just interesting things. What I should do is I should take all those and put them together in a little montage for people to
Oh
check out if
yeah.
they want. So
That seems like it was 20 years ago.
it does.
It just that's just wild.
Well, and there's
I
like,
I
no, go ahead.
as you were like recalling all of those events, it was like I that is not something I think about at all. It happened.
I don't think most people do, right? But there's
Yeah.
definitely a world pre-COVID and post-COVID. I mean, our
Definitely.
world has dramatically changed now in comparison to
Mhm.
what it was pre-COVID. And, technology, the way we interact socially, everything. And it's interesting. I'm not saying it's all bad, but it's definitely interesting. And
Yeah. You
so,
mentioned the flakiness, and I would argue like flakiness, the last minute behavior speaks to like a lack of discipline.
oh, absolutely.
Um,
I think COVID just really, I mean, people already had it before, but COVID just really, I think, enabled folks to have an excuse and to be extra flaky and
mm,
extra, it was condoned that, hey, it's all right if don't want to commit and you pull out the last minute and you don't make the proper commitments, and yeah, it is what it is. I mean, we'll keep moving forward and whatnot. But yeah, so during COVID, the online stuff, and when you're talking about teaching defensive tactics, I think online serves a purpose for some things, but especially if you're gonna do the physical stuff, you gotta do it live in person at some point. I mean, you can lay a lot of
Yep,
the foundations online with videos and whatnot, but you at some point you got to get with an instructor that knows what they're doing so they can like em embed that into you. And you
yep,
know that from all your, kickboxing training and
for
training
sure.
with us and obviously the defensive tactics training that you do with the gals. So when you started that, was that because you had mentioned that you were teaching it, were you teaching it online at one point?
Um, so Grand Valley, their desire was to move to fully remote in the
Hmm.
movement science space, like the gym courses, which included self-defense. And I just did not feel comfortable with it.
Yep.
I felt, there was some degree of risk in terms of like the liability if we were to teach
Sure.
hands-on techniques and, God forbid something happened. Um, so I made the conscious choice to shift over to the police academy, and jumping into defensive tactics where I've spent uh, many, many years just teaching women was
Okay.
interesting. And that was kind of where I built that persona, right? Because my main the predominant audience is a young 20 something male
Yeah.
who's entering law enforcement, and
Yeah.
now they have, in my first year teaching, a very pregnant female demonstrating takedowns, you know, ground defense, all of the things. And I remember being 34 weeks pregnant and one of the recruits saying like, well, it looks different when you do it compared to when this male instructor does it. And I'm thinking, of course it does. I have this huge belly.
I've small
Um,
like a basketball, of course.
yeah. Um, but I've maintained contact with some of those first year students, and it's funny because they have talked to students in my later academy sessions, and apparently it was probably because I was hungry all the time and tired and all the pregnancy
A
related things.
little cranky.
They were like, yeah, that first year crew was like, man, you were just brutal.
I don't know. I still hear that, so I don't know if it was just
Uh,
like
yeah, yeah. I get to shift. I don't plan to be the hard nosed, like knife handed drill instructor teaching,
Well, there's a
going back
place
to my
for
roots.
that.
Yeah, there's a time and a place.
Yeah,
Parenthood, teenagers,
yeah.
it's always going to be in me.
The Kate boot camp. Weren't
Yeah,
you worked in dispatch for a while, didn't you?
I did. I spent half my career in dispatch and half my career out in the road patrol.
How long
So,
were you an officer on the road?
um, 7 years thereabouts.
Oh, wow, okay. And
Hmm.
then, and does that include your stint as a community officer as well?
Yeah, yeah. So that was my last couple years was in
Okay.
community policing, and that was amazing. I mean, I was serving the community where I grew up, where I was living. The opportunity to build like a vast network, both of like business owners, you know, event hosts, um, people in the community, moving home essentially. So like
Right.
reestablishing relationships with former neighbors and people I went to high school with. So it was a tremendous experience. Um, Also, I had some experience with management related job roles.
Yeah.
So one of my big initiatives was helping with the incident action plans
Okay.
for township events.
Yeah.
And that's so outside the scope of like normal law enforcement responsibilities. But it was something that I looked back on my time in dispatch, and very often I saw it as like, why did I wait so long?
Hmm.
I I'm such an active person. Um, so I looked at it as like I was essentially chained to my desk by this headset. Um, the older I got, you see the value in having to establish a rapport with people who
Oh
are
yeah.
very high emotion. They're experiencing this traumatic event. And it's, of course, absent like the typical key interpersonal communication skills, right? Eye contact, like all the things, having to do this while on the phone with someone. So um, the experience was, tremendous. And this emergency management, developing these plans allowed me to kind of come full circle, use the skills and training I had gotten in dispatch and in the law enforcement field, bring it all together and know that our events are safer because of these plans.
Right. Absolutely. And I mean, that's invaluable experience too of just the communication skills that you had to amass during, your dispatch days. And,
Yep.
I've been getting hired a fair amount for organizations because I don't do a tremendous amount of corporate work. Most of my trainings, when I'm out and about, it's usually law enforcement, some military, security
Mm-hmm.
teams. I do teachers, hospitals, and that. A lot of the avenues that there's a larger potential for physical violence.
Sure. Yep.
But I occasionally get hired by corporations to do like verbal communication, team building, conflict management stuff. And, like one group that brought me in was actually a credit union. And their
Oh.
team wasn't, it was right around the election time. And their team was being very passive aggressive towards one another because they'd get on, and mainly the IT team, right? They'd get online and they would see, oh well, so and so is voting for that person. I didn't know that they were that way, right? And rather than working it out, they would be passive aggressive, not have good communications, and the management started noticing that their work performance was plummeting because
Oh.
of this. So they had brought me in to help them do some verbal stuff, right? Just talking to
Mm-hmm.
one another. And I had another company that did a merger, and they were having problems with their teams, especially the previous management teams that were putting on management positions. And so they were just not getting along and functioning as a team well. A lot of that was verbal communications, but
Yeah.
all the programs that I do have some physical component to it.
Sure.
But my point is, your experience on dispatch, as well as being an officer with the verbal communications that you have to do with that and under stress and whatnot, that's
Yeah.
invaluable that a lot of folks don't really have that much of.
Yeah.
And it's not just the younger people, it's just people in general. When you get used to texting and instant messaging and Facebooking, it is different than communicating one-on-one um, under stress, especially. Some people
Mm-hmm.
have a hard enough time. Some people would get anxiety just having a conversation, right? Let
Oh,
alone let
yeah.
alone a tough conversation.
Yeah. The police academy, I mean, that was a running theme, a real point of struggle for many of the recruits. And I think a lot of it does have to do with COVID. You
Sure.
can't blame an entire generation when you see it spanning all age ranges. But it was just having a conversation with people versus this robotic, like, who, what, when, where, why.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that good self defense programs place an emphasis on de escalation versus just coming in, throwing hands, ending the fight, and moving on with your life. I think that there's a lot more to being well rounded as a protector, and one of the focuses should be, and I know that you do a phenomenal job of this, but it's really like not necessarily avoiding conflict entirely, but not raising the degree of tension or aggression to put yourself in a position where there's no other option, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of programs out there, and this is reinforced by movies, it's reinforced by online stuff, it's reinforced now by, I would say, sport, martial art,
Mm-hmm.
is
Absolutely. Yeah.
is that, and you know this, right? True conflict management and self-defense is a facet of conflict management, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's multifaceted. You have to be well-rounded. It is not like an
Yep.
action movie where you go in, like you're saying, you bust them up and then you go along your life. It's not like that. It's mental, it's emotional, it's physical, it's even spiritual if you want to get to that. It's the way you
Yeah.
live your life, it's the way you approach and present yourself to the world, it's how you hold yourself, it's what you pay attention to, your aware. It's everything. And getting that piece in with folks it's always been challenging, right? Because
Yeah.
people are, well, okay, Craig, well, if this happens, what do you do? It's like, how did you get there? And I can, I spent my whole life doing martial arty stuff. I can show you, I can toss you around with whatever position, that you want to
Right.
inquire about. That's not going to do you any good. And you're thinking about it from the wrong way. Yes, that's important to be able to have the physical knowledge, to do something physically at that level, but there's more to it than that. And it's not all about that. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people just, they don't get that part of it. And some people don't have the patience to embrace that part of it, like in a training circumstance.
I think that's a big part of it too. There's, what's shiny and the sexy aspects of like self-defense training is like some outrageous technique, right? The ground defense, the takedowns, all of the things that you're excited to go and show your friends. But what is really important, at least in my mind, targeting women, even doing training with mothers and how to be protectors, which is second nature to moms, but
Absolutely.
I think it's the mindset, right?
Yeah.
And women are conditioned out of that, right? Society tells us all the reasons why we should rely on our husbands. We should wait for law enforcement. We're not strong enough to do it. We're all the things.
Well,
Um,
now they're even saying that to men,
yes, I had heard that too.
right? So it's like, well, who's gonna fill that role now? If we
Right.
can't rely upon the government to do all, well, we shouldn't be relying upon the government to do doing all those. And everybody, everything's like death by committee. It's like, oh, you can't make that decision for yourself. It's like, listen, I was just going to the bathroom. I think I can handle it myself. I don't need to,
I
I don't
know.
need to Google it. I think I'm good. Now, are
Death
you
by
certified for
committee.
that?
Yeah, that's
It's
so funny.
ridiculous.
That's so true. Um, so in addition to playing sports, I was also in theater as a kid, and I realized like much later in life, um, in coaching defensive tactics, a little bit of firearms instructor exposure to, like, there's a lot to be said for positive self-talk. Um, it worked for me throughout sports, but I had this one pivotal moment, and it was a line in Alice in Wonderland.
I like it.
So the childhood production of Alice in Wonderland, and the line was, and I feel like I didn't have that many lines. There was multiple Alice's. It was such a short scene, but the line was, "I'm not your prisoner, and I don't need rescuing." And I had said it practicing so many times that I like wholeheartedly believed that out of the context of this being like a play. And so when it was production time, I'm saying this into the audience, and the audience is like, yeah, clearly she believes this. Like, this is very like compelling.
That's cool.
Um, so I had taught my recruits, like, it doesn't have to be some woo woo flowery thing, nor does it have to be some like hard charging battle cry, but have that statement that you say to yourself in the trenches when it gets hard, when you don't want to continue running, when I'm screaming at you to do more burpees, whatever the case may be. If you're in a gunfight, if you are fight on your back fighting for your life, have that statement that will pull you out of that, get you back in the game, and get you home to your family.
That's funny because I went to it's a couple years ago now. Um, I'm not a huge Tony Robbins fan, but I am a Tony Robbins fan. And
Mhm.
I've been following Tony ever since the 80s.
Okay.
I got the chance to I went to a conference and he was one of the keynotes. So he spoke for like 5 hours and
Wow.
it was really cool. And then I'm like, well, I want to go to one of his multi-day Date with
Mhm.
Destiny or Awakening the Warrior Within or the Empower Within or whatever his program's called. But I'm like, I want to do this. And so I looked it up and got some dates, and then COVID hit. And I was like, oh crap.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
nobody was doing any live shows and whatnot. So I was at his first live show after COVID, and it was down in Florida. And they're insane. I mean, it's not everybody's cup of tea. They're insane. It was a big
Sure.
stretch for me too, because it was, a little bit of Tony goes a long way. I love him to death, but
Yeah.
not my style, but that's
Mhm.
one of the things I like about him. Anyways, the first day started at 7 in the morning where I was in line. I didn't get back to my hotel until almost 2 o'clock in the morning. And it was like that every day, every day. Day one, you did the fire walk, right? So there's this whole tutorial, and here's the point of what you were saying. Because he does the same thing. He has you come up with like a word or a phrase
Mhm.
that will get you through, when you're mentally starting to struggle, so you can just trigger yourself. So
Yeah.
that just reminded me of that. And so we had, our kind of trigger word, and then you walk across the fire, and I like doing that kind of stuff. Yes.
Yeah.
And
There
it was
I it seems like, it's woo woo or mysticism or however, people want to paint that picture, but at least in the athletic, like where athletes are concerned, professional athletes, Olympic athletes, I've seen videos of is it the Blue Angels, the pilots?
yeah, Blue Angels, sure.
Um they have this whole practice, and it is largely like positive affirmations and
Yeah.
positive self-talk. So
I mean, you got to do
I
the action too, but yeah, the mindset of it, it's not woo woo. I mean, it's proven. I mean, they have research studies done on, if you look at the top tier mindset, whether it's an athlete, whether it's a business person, I mean, you name it,
mhm.
military personnel, you take the Navy SEALs and whatnot.
Yep,
Mindset's huge. Without mindset, now granted, you need the mindset and the action. You
correct.
just can't tell yourself, like Tony's big when he talks about this. He's like, I'm not, he said, people tout me as being this big motivational speaker. He said, like, I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm motivating when I speak. He said, but it's not just about, it's like you don't go in your garden and say, well, there are no weeds here. There are no weeds here. There are no weeds here, right? You actually got to go and pull the weeds. You got to
Yeah,
do something. So it's not about just having the mindset. You actually have to have the action too. So it's both. And
yep.
and that's where, if you're like you probably heard about the what do they call it? The attraction factor or whatever, the laws of attraction. And
Mhm.
it was big a while back where the book The Secret came out and then they created a movie on it and really kind of new agey. And it was all
Yeah,
about, you attract these things to you. It's like, well, I believe you do, but you also have to do the work. So
right.
it's not just the words like you're saying, it's also the actions to it. And that's where the woo goes away and the actual, I think, results occur.
Yep, I agree.
So I wanted to get into two. We could talk all day long. It's around an hour now. So there's two things I want to talk about. Number one, just for my morbid curiosity and my I don't know, just because I'm a Delta Bravo sometimes, but You were talking about your bad relationship with Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So what?
So you probably recognize post-COVID, there was a greater emphasis on de-escalation
Yeah,
being like the foremost training initiative in the law enforcement community, which was very important. Definitely saw the value in that. And then there was a shift to Gracie street survival
yeah,
and jujitsu.
yeah.
Um, and I think for me, I'm very stubborn. I I fall back on my comfort zone where like combatives is concerned, and that's very much kicks first and like strikes.
Yeah.
So I start to see like jujitsu being integrated into our block trainings at the department, and then it just goes wild. And even as I am, in this long-standing relationship with kickboxing, now suddenly my coach is telling me like, well, we could cross train. There's value in this. If you wanted to do MMA one day, you should probably get some exposure. And I I think that part of my distaste for it comes from water polo because you have to have the ability to swim freely towards the goal. But what, of course, ends up happening is you're tangled up with an opposing player. And that's what jujitsu feels like to me.
There's
Um,
a place for it. I mean,
yeah.
I started in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the 90s, shortly after the UFC. I've trained with the Gracies extensively. We were the first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu place in town back
Hmm.
before I couldn't even pay people to go to do it. And as you know, I don't teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu proper, meaning, it's not the
Yeah.
mainstay of our academy. It's part of the
Right.
curriculum.
Yep.
And I have a very extensive Japanese Jiu-Jitsu background, Taijutsu. I've got a higher rank in that than I do in Krav. And all these old battlefield systems of Jiu-Jitsu where grappling is a part of it. And
Yep.
it's interesting, it's the flavor of the week. And it can be an effective solution in some ways, but it's a tool. Just like every situation isn't a gun problem, nor is every situation a grappling problem. I think
Right. Exactly.
definitely it's necessary to have in your mix, but now that it's the flavor, it's like everybody gravitates. If I had $1 for every time I hear BJJ, I would be rich, because so that's the
Hmm.
kind of flavor now. And there's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu place on every corner now. And I think it's a
Truly.
great sport. It's wonderful. As far as a defensive tactics protocol, it's one tool, just like your pepper spray or your taser or your, sidearm, you know, that's one aspect of a larger continuum. So I think for police officers, it should be a mainstay for a lot of the things, especially for arresting tactics and you're trying to restrain and control
Absolutely.
somebody. But that's not all even for police officers. But for civilians, man, every situation does not constitute, you tying up with them, grappling.
Well, and on the civilian side, particularly for women, you don't want to end up on the ground. If
No.
anything, you want to avoid that at all costs. So, um,
Well, the
there
cop
will
too,
be
unless you have backup, you don't be rolling around with somebody. You're
right,
gonna get the
exactly.
boot put to you.
Yeah.
So, and it's good if you have people around, and two, the objective is different. A lot of people misunderstand that too. If I'm training Navy SEALs, they have a different objective than a police officer that has a different
Hmm.
objective than a self-defense situation where you're just trying to escape that has
Yeah.
a different objective. If I'm working with a executive protection, a bodyguard, different,
Yeah.
each one of those are a different objective. And the people don't think, I mean, they just don't know to think that. They're like, well,
Right.
Navy SEAL does it, it must be great. Or hey, if a cop does it, it must be great. Well, no, not necessarily.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is the flavor of the week. I mean, I do see the value in it to some degree, but I have also seen time and time again that, in the training environment, recruits would like order someone to the ground for the purpose of going hands-on from the ground.
Yeah.
I also think that most people fail to realize that fights start standing. They seldom start on the ground.
Well, and people
Uh,
don't realize too the statistic of, well, hey, don't most fights end up on the ground? You know where they got those statistics from? You have to take two things into consideration. Number one, the Gracies were mainly the group that was touting that. And number two, those are from the FBI statistics of law enforcement engagements. So of course, if you're in law enforcement, most of those engagements are going to end up in the ground.
right.
But if you look at most assaults, like just aggravated assault and batteries, they most of them do not end up on the ground. Only
Mm-hmm.
about maybe a quarter.
Yeah.
Not, well, 80%, or whatever their stat was. 80% of the, fights end on the ground. And that's total bullshit.
Yeah.
For civilians, it is accurate if you're a cop, of course, because I'm trying to put handcuffs on you.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the time, if we end up in an altercation, it is probably going to end up on the ground because I'm trying to arrest you.
Yep. Well,
But
and
no, go ahead.
that statistic would be, I mean, like terrifying to a woman. So to
Yeah,
know that
as
it's
well it should be.
skewed based on like law enforcement interaction, that's yeah. I I think that the the main exposure I have had to jujitsu was actually your ground defense techniques.
Okay.
Um, and
Mine's like
you know,
old. It's two things. It's old man jujitsu nowadays, you know, because it's old school jujitsu.
yeah,
It's funny. A lot of the names, people are calling it this, or that. I'm like, I don't know it by that name because it changed. I mean, it's kind of cool. I mean, that part's cool. If you like the sport of it, it's really cool. And I think the
yeah,
sport can help you to stay active and moving around, but you really have to, differentiate. Not to mention, I'm 54 years old. I've been training and competing since I was 6. I stopped competing when I was in my mid 30s. I mean, I have got chronic issues. I still move around pretty well, but I'm not 20, 30 years old. My heart and hat goes out to these middle-aged people, not just men, but middle-aged
mm,
folks who are like, "Oh, I want to do this martial art now." And it's like, dude, you're middle-aged, you're not an athlete, and jiu-jitsu is a not only competitive sport, but it's a demanding sport physically.
yeah,
Now you
certainly,
can do it until, like Elio did it until he was in his 90s, shortly before he died. But he didn't roll in his 90s like he rolled in his 80s, like he rolled in his, 70s or 50s or 40s or 20s.
yeah,
If you get a good partner and you are reasonable with one another, you could do it forever. Probably, unless something happens, but that is not the
mm-hmm,
case, especially not the case in most academies.
right,
You got a young 20-year-old hard charger. His idea of going light and your idea at 40 or 50 of going light is a very different experience. And
yeah,
and it's hard to gauge that sometimes, especially if you're new. So, and again, I can remember back when Tai Bo was popular. Remember Tai
oh
Bo?
yeah, I remember those, yeah,
So I'd get people coming to my self-defense workshops and whatnot, and I would ask them, "Hey, do you have any experience?" They're like, "Oh yeah, I'm pretty versed. I did Tai Bo for 3 years." In their mind, that was self-defense. Just like in people's mind, "Hey, I go to jiu-jitsu class, so that is like self-defense, defensive tactics."
yeah,
It's more no than yes. It's just like, hey, if you play baseball, you can swing a bat, and if you hit somebody with a bat, you can defend yourself.
yeah,
But just because you play baseball and swing a bat doesn't mean you're taking self-defense. And
right,
I think a
exactly,
lot of
yeah.
people are just really misled on that.
Well,
So,
and and it sounds like hypocritical for me to say because I've spent the majority of my years training just doing kickboxing, but I've dabbled in different disciplines. I've done just Muay Thai. I've done Dutch kickboxing. I've done MMA training. I've trained in like fight camp type environments
right,
with guys that are going to fight. Um, but if you are making self-defense education and that protector uh, lifestyle, if that's important to you, you owe it to yourself to have different experiences. So I I don't love jujitsu. I just don't love being on the ground with someone. I don't love being tangled up with someone. I know that that's not where I'm at my best performance wise. I need to have those experiences. I need to suck at it. I need to face a much larger opponent and find my way out of it. I think that that's important. I think there's value in that. I think the jujitsu community pushes this narrative that like, you know, you're gonna suck, you're gonna struggle, you're gonna have people that are bigger than you. So it's more so like building that mental fortitude. I know that
Well, it's
Jocko Willing preaches that.
Jocko,
Um,
Joe Rogan, you know,
yeah,
Tim,
but
what's his name? Tim Kennedy.
yeah, the same type of thing. But I guess in my eyes, because I'm old school, um, you can have that same type of character building experience while getting punched in the face or kicked in the liver.
Well, I think there is something to any type of competitive sport that's contact.
hmm
Going up against someone who is a resisting opponent and you're building fortitude and you're struggling physically.
Yep.
Um, you know, if you take a traditional martial artist who doesn't spar versus pick anyone.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be MMA, it doesn't have to be BJJ, could be boxing, wrestling. I mean, pick anybody who's used to like sport and knocking heads with resisting opponents, and typically they're going to do better with somebody who just punches air and shadow boxes. Just
Yep.
because they don't have the experience, they don't have that contact, they don't have the mindset in that regards. Now, I like both. I love traditional martial arts. I like sports. I love sports. I think you need to be if depend. Now, let me back up. You got to know your why. Why are you training? What are you
Yeah.
training for? If you're training to do a sport and a competition, well, great, then do that. I had some guy call me up a few weeks ago, just turned 40, wanted to get back in the ring, MMA, right? He's like, well, I did it 10 years ago, and I didn't end on the note that I wanted to, so I want to get back in there. So I said, well, and he wanted me to teach him, and I'm like, I'm not your guy. If you're gonna do that, I would say don't do it. First off, you're going through your midlife crisis. I wouldn't be going in an MMA ring when you're 40 years old. I wouldn't recommend it. That's
Yeah.
just, I got out when I was in my early 30s, like 33, I think was my last fight. I mean, even go to a gym like that, you just got to be careful. You should have a different priority in my mind. But hey, if you got to get your yayas out, freaking go do it. Do it in the ring. Great. Which brings us to my second point. It's like, well, if that is what you want to do, don't pick me as your coach.
Yeah.
That's not what I do. I don't coach competitors like that. I used to. We used to have a
hmm
competitive team, at the academy years ago. Probably 20, well, more than 20 years ago now. But I said, so I gave them Black Lion's number. I'm like, why don't you go to Black Lion? There's a UFC champion there. They've got striking, they've got jiu-jitsu. They'll hook you up. I said, but
Oh, maybe I'll be training with him soon enough.
are you going Black Lion?
hmm
Yeah, so it's like if you want to do it, go to those folks because that's what they're doing. So if you want to get good at that, then hang out with people who are doing that. So
Yeah.
I think you really got to be specific on your why. Just like our classes at Ronin, they're well-rounded.
hmm
And they're not
Definitely.
incredibly, unless you're going through a testing rotation, they're not incredibly intense. They're sustainable for the average person with an average athleticism and age.
Yeah.
And it's to help you to become well-rounded in all the areas, including leadership and conflict management skills and, mindset and your persona and obviously all the fun stuff, the striking and the weapons and the, grappling and all that. But I think know your why. And if you don't know your why, it's easy just to, I think, go to what's popular.
Yep. Well, we'll see if I have a newbie in my session soon enough, I guess.
I can't remember his name. So is Duncan out there?
He is, yeah.
Duncan, okay.
So I don't think it's been a full year, but he picked up the main striking coach position there, and then
Okay.
there's another coach, Magnus Carlgren.
Oh, Magnus, both those guys trained at my place.
Okay,
Duncan came to us couple, did he? No, Duncan may not have ever trained at my place. Magnus did, though. Mr. Actually, that's who I referred him to. Go talk to Magnus. He's your guy.
so training with Duncan for many years, and him being a very technical fighter and much smaller framed than me, um, getting the opportunity to train with Magnus has been really interesting because I'm pretty aggressive with my like striking style. So the first time I sparred with him, it was like a brick wall. I mean, just
Yeah. He's a talented
it was
martial artist.
yes, definitely.
Duncan is too. I mean, from what I've seen. And both of those guys, neither one of them are spring chickens either. Duncan's, I think, older than I am.
Mhm.
And then Magnus
Yep.
is a little younger than I am, I think. But Magnus has got to
Yep.
be 50 or pushing 50.
I think he had recently said he's nearing 50.
Yeah. And then Duncan's got to be, he must be, I would say 56, 57.
I I'm trying to think of when his birthday is. I mean, he impresses me. No offense, but I mean, to still be at his level, like training
Yeah,
in you
absolutely.
similarly, you realize the older you get and when you have relationships with people that are decades older than you, like age really is just a number. I have a neighbor, she turned 77 and we asked her, what do you want to do for your birthday? And she said, I want to try water skiing again. Like
Yeah, you got to stay
we,
active. My mom just turned 80 today. It's her birthday. Happy birthday, Mom.
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and my dad, he's 81. He'll be 81 in a couple days, and he's who got me into martial arts, and he still trains. He doesn't train martial arts anymore, but he still trains all the time. He bikes. I don't know. He probably bike rides 30 miles a day, 50 miles a day.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, he's crazy. He goes on the White Pine Trail and he goes out to Ravenna and back. They live in Walker, Ravenna and back every day.
That's
And then a couple times a week, he'll go to Muskegon and back, which is like a 70-mile round trip, I think, something like that, 75.
that's incredible.
Yeah, 81, so he still stays
Yep.
very active. So I come by honestly, anyways. My mom, always did her Zumba or, whatever. She was always in aerobics or whatever. So they both always trained, always worked out. And like I said, my dad started me in boxing and karate back when I was a kid. And then I went to a professional school. But all right, like I said, we can talk forever, but there's two questions that I have for you. Number one is, if you had advice for people out there who we could do training or were thinking about training, not just martial arts, but really this idea of being a protector, what advice would you have for them?
Well, I think we kind of touched on it. I think it's important to expose yourself to different systems of martial arts, um, different ideas of what self-defense means. There are hundreds of good self-defense programs. You're not going to go to one and encounter something that's wildly different than the next, right? You can only throw a strike so many different ways. You can only throw a knee or a kick so many ways. Um, but the message is really key in my mind. It's about that mindset. It's about, you know, finding what it is within you that's driving you to be a protector, right? Is it you just have something to prove to yourself, you just have something to prove to someone else? Because that in my eyes is not the right answer. That was my answer in my younger years, and that has since shifted based on my heart for service, my relationship with my community, and obviously becoming a parent. So Your why will change. It should change through the years. But listening to, you know, the reasons that your instructors got into the business, right? Having, you know, having that coaching relationship with Duncan for so many years, and him being former law enforcement as well, he's had a profound impact on my life. I think that it's not just about building strength, building athleticism, increasing your confidence, your mental fortitude. Those relationships that you build with your coaches should, you know, if the coach is doing it right, they should have truly a profound impact on you as a person. I would not have had I mean, I told you this over text. I would not have had the confidence to throw myself into a small business, open my self-defense company, had I not had the experiences at Ronin with you. Duncan was a big part of that. So that protector lifestyle and having self-defense be an ongoing mainstay in your life will impact every arena of your life, whether you realize it or not. And I think that's really important.
Nice. Any special or particular advice for women and or parents who have daughters?
I know that it can be intimidating as a woman to enter into a gym that's very likely predominantly male. I will say for like this community, you know, Black Lion, the community of women specifically there, I talk to women at that gym that I have never met in person. And they follow my training and they follow me on social media and they know that I've got this passion for self defense. So don't let that intimidation factor keep you. The community that you'll find, not only women, but your male training partners. It is so rare that you find someone that is disrespectful just in the sparring aspect or just not a good partner. It's a community that kind of polices themselves. So just dive in, you know, walk in that first day, have an open mind, and soon enough, I know, having experienced a multitude of different disciplines, combative programs, like you will fall in love with it. Now, I don't know if I have the best advice for a parent with daughters. My parents, I feel, really did it right with me. They never forced me into sport. They allowed me to experience different types of sport. I don't know most parents. I don't think that most parents would, you know, put their 4-year-old, 5-year-old daughter into like street hockey, floor hockey. But that shaped who I am today, and I'm so grateful for it. I'm at the point now with my 3-year-old daughter where she has boxing gloves. We have little striking mitts,
That's awesome.
and
Yeah.
you know, I'm wary. You know, I want her to have firm, established boundaries and know that, you know, she doesn't need to tolerate abuse or disrespect. She doesn't need to tolerate anyone putting their hands on her if she doesn't desire it. But I also don't want her to be like a playground brutalizer.
Right.
So I don't exactly know which age is appropriate to start with, like the real martial arts, kickboxing. I was actually going to ask you what you thought about it. Um,
It depends. I mean, and two, I think it depends on the instructor. I think as soon as a kid, you can get him in there, get him in there. You know, I started when I was 6 with
mhm.
my dad in the basement, you know, starting
Yep.
out with boxing and karate. They're, you know, Gracie's, holy cow, they start their kids, you know, before they can walk, they're rolling around with them. And I think
Yeah.
if it's done in a healthy way, and you know, if I were, I used to teach kids, and every once in a while I consider doing it again. But if I were to run kids classes nowadays, I would run it way more activity based,
Mhm.
right? Rolling around with them and a little bit of the combative stuff, kind of inching your way in there,
Yep.
um, as far as development goes. And then, you know, as they grow in it, you can then continue to expand it more into the combatives aspect. But I think it's if you have the right teacher and they're teaching respect and all that bonding and the, cognitive things and the leadership things, it's
Mhm.
I think a great venue for kids as long as it's age appropriate when they're young.
Yep. Well, and I think as a parent, I have all daughters, so it's been really important to me to model the behavior and have the expectations that you know I I would have a dispute with like a family member in like a holiday setting, and I'm there's a way to approach conflict appropriately versus being walked on or
Right.
avoiding it altogether. So it's that de-escalation aspect that's important too, um, and just allowing your kid to have multiple different experiences.
Yep.
Right now, the flavor is Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Maybe that will allow them to see they really enjoy wrestling, and that will lead on to a lengthy sport career, high school and beyond. Maybe it isn't. Maybe they do karate and that builds that foundation of athleticism and fitness, and they can go on and be successful in something else.
No, I totally agree. That's awesome. So lastly, can you tell us a little bit about your organization? And I'll get the resources from you too. So I'll put it in the show notes for if they want to, connect with you. Either I don't know how you do it, your social media, your website, or whatever. But
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about what you got going on.
So I left the RAD program, as I said, to build my own program. My time kickboxing, dabbling in different disciplines kind of shaped that, as well as being a female in law enforcement, having my experience in dispatch. I wanted to build something that, again, touched on or emphasized that mindset component, more situational awareness, de-escalation, having a well-rounded curriculum. Of course, I love the hands-on techniques. I love teaching striking and kicking, but that is not what gives every woman the warm and fuzzies. And I wanted to give them the tools to avoid a physical encounter if they could help it. I thought long and hard about, this being a sort of legacy project and something that would make my daughter proud. Um, the title of my business is Mama Defense. Mama
Mama.
stands for Mama. Yep. Stands for mindset, awareness, movement, and aggression. Um,
I love it.
yep. So an ode to my favorite job title, that new like defining character component for me. Um, I I just hope that it becomes something that my daughter tells her friends about. My stepdaughters are posting it on their social media, which has been really cool because as a step parent, you really do anything just to gain their approval
Right.
as a human being. So to see them, proud of me and wanting to share this message has been really incredible.
Yeah, that's very fulfilling. That's awesome. Now, do you do private events? Do you do public events that people can sign up for? How would somebody get involved if they wanted to do, I want to do Mama Defense, how do they go about it?
Yeah. I do have a couple seminars coming up. I have one that's at Byron Center Rec at that's on May 3rd in the
Okay.
morning. Um, being
How
that Mother's
long?
Day is
I'm sorry,
coming
how
up,
long is it?
it's 8 to noon. Yep,
4 hours. Okay, cool.
yep. Being that Mother's Day is coming up, I was kind of targeting those mother-daughter duos. That seems to be my favorite audience. The kids kind of fall in line because mom's running the show, right? So they've got to pay attention, but it's a fun bonding moment for them. So
Yeah.
I've got that coming up. I within the last couple of years had several like corporate contracts, much like you were saying. Um, had a lot of success with that. Enjoyed the corporate environment, but I obviously would like to target the high school kiddo going off to college and being on her own.
Yeah.
So community classes. I have several within the next couple months, and I love teaching outdoors, like teaching in a park space. I mean,
Yeah, I love that too.
I'm really borrowing that from having the couple weeks training during COVID with you when you hosted in the park. I thought that was a really incredible experience, and I love being outdoors. So,
Yeah, I love the outside
oh,
stuff, outdoor boot camps and and
yeah,
you're outdoors all the time. And
yep,
we got that Peace Walker Live that you taught at last
that's
year.
right.
That was
Yeah.
outdoors. I love the outdoor feel. It's really cool. So website.
I'm Mama Defense on Instagram.
Okay.
In the process of building my website, I won a website, believe it or not, an entire website build. So it's
That's
been
awesome.
I know. Thankfully, I have been trying to navigate Squarespace and all of the different do-it-yourself uh, websites, and that is not in my wheelhouse,
Yeah,
unsurprisingly.
it's 'cause I do all my own IT stuff.
You do?
Yeah, I got all, Squarespace. I've got so many platforms.
Yeah.
We got the Squarespace sites, which is Ronin and Peace Walker. And then I've got the membership sites, which are on another platform called Mighty Networks. And yeah,
Okay.
it's crazy. If you can have someone do it, I would say go for that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I want
Yep.
somebody to do mine.
So soon
So,
enough, it will be live and
yes.
it will be Mama Defense.
Cool. Well, I will get that information from you, and I'll put that on the show notes too for folks if they want to reach out to you. But aside from that, hey, I really appreciate you spending some time with me and sharing with myself and our community. Um, you're doing good things out there. So keep going, keep doing them.
Thank
So
you.
if any of you out there listening have the opportunity to do some training with Kate, you will not be disappointed. You'll get a lot out of her trainings. She's got a lot of good experience, a lot of things to share, and the right heart, the protector heart. So thanks,
Well,
Kate. I
thank you. That
appreciate
means
you.
a lot.
All right, gang, out there in podcast land. That's it from us today. If you want to get involved in this community, don't forget get on peacewalker.mn.co. And in the meantime, I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks again. Take care.